Okay, I'll get started. My name is Lisa Koch. I am the Associate Director of the University of Kansas Transportation Center, and we are really excited to introduce our first webinar under the Modern Midwest Mobility Series. This series was funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, and the Kansas State Transportation Innovation Council. The focus on this webinar is to help you all identify solutions that are tried and tested in the Midwest, but that are innovative and interesting. And we're excited to provide this to you as have a different spin on innovation. A lot of times you'll watch innovation webinars or webinars about transportation improvements, and they're focused on larger communities or they're focused on the coasts. And we really wanted to share with you innovations that are occurring right here in the Midwest. So with that, I am going to transfer over to, I also have to do a promo for our next webinar, August 24th, on traffic calming and Haze. So looking at innovative traffic calming solutions in Western Kansas. So with that, I will transition this over to Nikila Gunda, who's going to be managing the webinar today.
Hello, everyone. This is Nikila. Again, you guys all might have been on Zoom webinars like 100 times by now, but as a tradition, these are like some of the expectations on this webinar. So just so you know, this presentation is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. To get notified, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel along with this webinar and more other videos. To have better quality and on the audio and the video, if you want, you can turn on your videos or turn off your audios. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A box as you can see on the screen. And we will answer the presenters will answer the questions at the end of the sessions. We do have the Q&A session at the end for about 10 minutes where you can ask any questions. And just in case if you lose any connection, you can take a note of my email address or the phone number for immediate assistance. With that said, again, welcome to our very first webinar of Modern Mobility, Midwest Mobility webinar series. And today, our first topic, we are kicking it off with STEP Innovations, and our presenters, Stephanie and Jared, are from Flint Hills MPO. So welcome, Stephanie and Jared, and the floor is yours.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Jared and I are excited to be able to share with you some of the work we've been doing in our region. Just for those of you that aren't aware, STEP stands for Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian. It's a federal highway initiative to implement countermeasures to help to improve pedestrian safety. Just to kind of orient you to where we are working, Jared and I are the only two full-time staff people for the MPO. We do cover an area of about 110,000 people, but our largest city is Manhattan. It's about 54,000, and some of our smallest communities we work with are about 1,000 people. And then we'll also be sharing with you some projects we've been working on in Junction City. When we started to look at bicycle and pedestrian safety, we really kind of acknowledged that there were three main issues that were creating this problem. First, obviously, safety. And to give you some statistics from Manhattan, bicycles comprise about 9% of the commuter mode share in the community, but they also are responsible for about 15% of crashes. So there's a little bit of a disparity there. And then we all are aware of the national trend right now where we've been really successful in lowering the number of vehicle fatalities, but the same cannot be said for bicycles and pedestrians. So we definitely have an issue on our hands, and we're trying to figure out a way to solve that. So the family that you see here in this picture, they don't have to run across the street after going to the grocery store to get their groceries. And one of the issues we haven't been able to solve that safety issue is because of funding. We all have funding struggles in our communities, and those dollars are really limited. And we love seeing projects like you see here, a great pedestrian island near an elementary school, because it does help with the safety aspect. But we only get maybe one, if possibly two of these a year. And we want to do more of this, and we need to find a way to do more with less. And then the other issue that we've run into is the priority component. So at least in our communities that we work with, bicycles and pedestrians don't really get that that level of priority that roadways do. And so at a couple of our different events, we've done what you see here. We call these pledge cards. And these pledge cards, on the back side of it, it says, walking and biking are important to me because. And it gives the community members an opportunity to say why they walk and bike and why it should be a priority for our communities. And then we were actually able to collect almost 200 of these at one of the project sites, and we gave them to the city commission. So just because people aren't showing up on a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. to voice their support for walking and biking, it's really, it sends a pretty strong message when you have a couple inch thick stack of these that you can take to them. So the problem that we've had, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out a way around this. And what we determined to be probably the best solution in our case was this idea of iterative project delivery, meaning that we don't have to have either nothing or have full construction, that there's these steps that we can take in between to help promote that pedestrian safety without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on just one project. And so the first component of this is what we call demonstration projects. And we really, that word demonstration project we have found isn't something that people are really fearful of. It gives this idea that we're just trying it out and it's not anything that's going to be permanent. And for us, we have them up for about a week. That's really the amount of time that we've found to be effective. However, the weather is really a determining factor, and Jared will kind of get into some of that with his portion of this. But they're really low cost and they're easy to install. So for the demonstration projects, that's something that Jared and I can easily install. And it just takes a couple of hours depending on the scope of that project. And the demo projects are really, really good for gaining community support, or to for people to actually experience. When we talk about pedestrian islands or curb extensions, it's hard for some of the public to really visualize what those look like. This allows them to interact and to really experience what that is, so that we can kind of take some of that unknown and that fear away. And then I wanted to walk through some of the projects we've done both in Junction City and in Manhattan. We're going to start in the northwest kind of area of Manhattan. This is a residential neighborhood, but there is a trail that goes here north-south along the trail, and there's several residential streets that cross it. And so at those intersects, we've done several projects. So this is kind of our existing conditions. It's a fairly wide residential street because there's parking that's allowed on both sides. However, there isn't a lot of parking that actually occurs. So the roadway, when you're a motorist, the roadway feels a lot wider than what it needs to be. So at two of the locations, we decided to do curb extensions, and you can see those here. And we did add in this double striped yellow line to kind of tell people that there's two different travel lanes here and to respect that. But people, when we were out there observing, people really weren't receptive to just the pavement marking. So we kind of made an on-the-fly decision to put in these yellow delineators at either end. And it seemed like people were a little bit more willing to respect that, that yellow stripe when there was this vertical object in the roadway. And then at the other location, we did a pedestrian island. This was much more effective at slowing vehicle speed, at yield rates. And this is something, kind of as a side note, we're actually going to be installing two of these along this corridor as semi-permanent projects, which we'll kind of get to next. But we've opted not to do the curb extension and just to make both of them the center pedestrian island, because it really was more effective at being able to slow traffic and to increase yield rates. We've also been able to do these in the heart of our downtown. So this intersection right here, it doesn't matter if you're a motorist, if you're a bicycle, if you're a pedestrian, it's a little scary for everybody. There's a lot of different conflict points, and there's parking that's allowed on both sides of the street on all four legs of the intersection. And so really the point that we were trying to make with the curb extensions here is that a pedestrian can come out and sit right here, kind of in line with those parked cars. And the motorists are able to see that pedestrian better, and that pedestrian's able to see if there's cars coming. The other issue that we have with this intersection is you can see the inlet down here at the bottom. There's a lot of storm drainage issues. If we tried to do permanent construction in this area, it's going to be a pretty hefty price tag because of all the storm water improvements that need to be done. So a demonstration project, or as we'll talk next, the semi-permanent projects are really helpful in those areas that there's a lot more going on than just a safety issue. And then the last one to share with you from Manhattan, this was, I think, the project that probably received the most attention. This is kind of in the heart of our community. So here off to the right, that's our city park, and we're looking at the trail that goes along that park. And then off to the left of the page, the Kansas State University is about 2 blocks away. About a block away is Aggieville, which is kind of a high destination bar restaurant district. And so this receives a lot of foot traffic, a lot of people walking and biking to the university, as well as vehicle traffic. And when we put up this project, we interacted with hundreds of people that were using it in all different modes. And when we would tell people this is only up for a week, they'd be like, no, please keep it. Please don't take it down. We love this so much. And we do have a success story with this, in that this is going to be moving to permanent construction. So our local transit agency, you can see the bus stop over here. They actually received a grant to make these curb extensions permanent. There's going to be rain gardens. The trail is going to be a raised crossing to give priority to bicycles and pedestrians rather than vehicles that are going past this to get to a parking lot. There's going to be a bus shelter. So it was a really, I wouldn't say that this demo project made that final construction happen. I think it just brought attention to it and gave it more priority than if we wouldn't have done it. The next couple of projects we'll talk about are in Junction City. Junction City is a community that's just kind of west of Manhattan. It's 23,000 people, so it's about half the size of the community that we just talked about. But it's over 50% of the kids that live in Junction City qualify for free and reduced lunch, and about 46% of the people that live in the community identify themselves as racial or an ethnic minority. So it's also a very transient community. There's a nearby military installation, so it has a heavy military influence. And when Jared and I started working with Junction City about 3 years ago on this type of project, they had zero bicycle-only infrastructure. They had a few trails, but most of those were used for recreation, like a loop around a park, or they were located in areas that just weren't well connected or could be used for transportation. And so when we proposed this idea of a bicycle boulevard, people wpeople in Junction City don't bike. We don't walk places. Everyone takes a car. But the demographic information kind of spoke otherwise. And so we proposed what you see here, a bicycle boulevard that goes from the downtown that's kind of at the bottom of the screen. And then the top left of the screen is where their former high school sat. And we had a lot of resistance, I would say. And it wasn't, it was more of a fear of the unknown, and they really didn't understand when we talked curb extensions what that meant. And so the biggest, I would say the most successful thing that we could tell them is, it's only for a week. Give us 7 days. If you hate it, we'll take it down. We never have to talk about it again. It goes away. And that really seemed to ease those fears, especially from the elected officials that were really concerned with kind of messing up the norm of what used to happen in the community. And so going through a couple of those projects, this is the most ambitious demonstration project that we undertook. It was a ride in, ride out sort of project that closed down through traffic on the bicycle boulevard. So the bicycle boulevard in this bottom picture is kind of running in front of us there. As we were installing this, and we had help from Junction city crews as well, though we got called a lot of colorful names. People that were driving were not happy with us. We were disrupting their normal commute. We were blocking the alley that people use to get to the KFC. We had people making all sorts of wacky turning movements trying to avoid this. And so we were just like, oh man, like this isn't going well at all. But then when we started talking to the people that were walking and biking, and even the residents that lived right around there, they absolutely love it. The residents came out, they're like, people aren't racing up and down our street. They're actually stopping at the stop signs. We can cross the street and people more often than not yield to us now. So we invited the mayor out so he could hear some of this as well, because we knew that he was going to get a lot of calls with nasty messages from the motorists that were like, what are you doing to my roadway? And he was able to experience how different this felt with this project in there. We also, kind of in the middle of the bicycle boulevard, we installed a chicane with a bus drop-off. So there is a school district building right here to the right. And they oftentimes have kids that get off to go in that building. And so we decided to make them a formal bus drop-off. What I would note on this project is we always kind of start on the outside. So we install the curb extensions you see here first, and then we kind of work our way towards the middle of the roadway. When we had the double yellow line in there, kind of separating travel lanes, we had a lot of folks that weren't being respective to that paint. And so we had to add in these, the 4 delineators that you see here on either end. And as soon as we had those delineators there and that visual barrier, that's what made people move to the correct side of the roadway and really slow their speeds down. I would say the same thing about this median here with the 4 delineators, that having those 4 delineators that was essential for people kind of staying between those paint markings. And then the last one to show you on the bicycle boulevard was a parking stripe and a crosswalk combo that we did at the far west end of the bicycle boulevard. This is right in front of a senior apartment building, and there is parking allowed on both sides of the street, but there aren't always cars parked out there, so the roadway feels a lot wider than what it really is. And you can, it's just a straight shot all the way down, so you can go pretty fast through this, and we definitely observed some of that. And so the parking stripe was just to kind of make it visually feel a little bit more narrow. We did use traffic tape for the parking stripe, and we did this project 2 years ago, and that traffic tape is still there, which the city doesn't mind at all. But if you're truly wanting to do a week-long project, traffic tape probably isn't the way to go on this. And then we had the curb extensions that you can see up here. And again, the curb extensions, they shorten that crossing distance for pedestrians, but they didn't really make motorists slow down like we were wanting to, and to be more aware of that crosswalk. And so what we learned from all of our other projects is that we needed to add this yellow delineator here in the middle of the roadway. And then you can see Jared with the other one sprinting out there to try to put it in place before I took this picture. And once we had that in, again, people, they stuck to their lane and they slowed down more than if it wasn't there. So that's something that we've learned going forward. We need to make sure that we have on these projects. And then the last note, as you see here in that picture, kind of in the foreground, is a yard sign, and it says demonstration project in progress. We started installing these at all of our projects just to let the community know what was happening. We would get a lot of questions from motorists, from people walking or biking, just saying, hey, what are you guys up to? And so we felt that when we weren't out there, we needed to have something to tell people, this is what's happening, this is why we're doing it, no city funds were used, and this will be something that we install at all of our projects moving forward. So those were the demonstration projects, our week-long projects, really to just test out, kind of get the community's feet wet when it comes to bike ped safety improvements. Now what we're starting to work on are semi-permanent projects. Since we heard from so many people, like, why is this only a week? Why are you guys taking it down? Please just keep it up here. We knew that we needed to do something rather than just sit around and wait for concrete construction dollars. So the semi-permanent projects we anticipate are going to be up for several years because of the type of product we're using and how we're installing those. They're still really low cost. They're quick to install. However, the MPO staff won't install these, which Jared will get into a little bit more. And they're ideal when you want to make a quick safety improvement, but you don't necessarily have the time or the dollars to wait for final construction. So to give you an idea of how all of these things have kind of fit together with the Junction City community, in 2019 is when we did all of our demonstration projects in Manhattan and in Junction City. And then in early 2020, the city of Junction City applied for a transportation alternative grant to make the bicycle boulevard permanent construction, and KDOT awarded them that. And some of the feedback that we got from our state DOT was that because you guys were able to show that the demonstration projects were so successful, that you had community support, that they really served their intended purpose, we are going to award this project. That was kind of a big note that we took away. And so now if we want to do a similar project, we know we should probably start with a demonstration project to be able to show we have that community support. And then we had so much momentum going with Junction City actually being like, yes, let's move forward with bike ped. This is a priority for us. And we were like, okay, we need to back up and kind of go back to our planning roots and develop an active transportation plan for them. So the MPO did this in-house. It has a list of priorities. It has some performance metrics in there for them, and they can really work towards starting to check off some projects from that list. And because they don't have a lot of funding available for permanent construction, we've identified the projects that would work really well as a semi-permanent project. And so we were actually awarded some State Transportation Innovation Council funding, which is STIC, to install 5 semi-permanent projects in Junction City, and all of those are near elementary schools. So it fits really well with the Safe Routes to School plan that the MPO developed for them a few years back. So it kind of helps to implement Safe Routes to School and the active transportation plan. And to give you a few ideas of what these semi-permanent projects are going to look like, I'm trying to advance my slides here. There we go. So this is one of the pedestrian islands. It's the same materials really that we used for demonstration projects, although we added in some rubber curbing. The thought is there that you might be willing to hit a plastic delineator that bounces back up with your vehicle, but the rubber curb is going to be a little bit rougher. So hopefully that adds some longevity to the project. And then another countermeasure that's identified in STEP are curb extensions. And so we again have the plastic delineators and some rubber curbs. And just like with all the other curb extensions, we learned you have to have something in the middle of the roadway to really kind of define the 2 travel lanes. But also with Junction City being a transient community because of the Army installation, we decided it would be good to add this state law yield to pedestrian sign, just a gentle reminder of what our state laws are, especially for people that are maybe new to the community and aren't aware that you should yield to somebody in the crosswalk. And then looking forward, there's one other example that should be coming up here in a second from Manhattan, and it's, there we go. The very first demonstration project we did in our region was at this intersection. And there's Manhattan Catholic schools that occupy actually 3 of these different buildings. And so there's over 6,000 kids and teachers walking through this intersection and every week. Going between the church and their 2 buildings. And so this was something that, that the school has had a lot of close calls reported of potential crashes between students or pedestrians and vehicles. And so we decided to put out these traffic cones thinking that we'll create these curb extensions, and the traffic cones are not a great idea. Some of them got drug away by vehicles. We live in a college community, so I think some of the cones went to live with some of our university students. Over a kind of probably 6 months, there weren't many of these left. But we are happy to report that we're going to be able to do a semi-permanent project at this location, which the school is elated about, and to really make this intersection safer for everybody that is using it. So that project is moving forward this fall. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jared, and he's going to walk through some of the more technical aspects of the projects. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Can everyone see the screen, my slides? Great. And I will just add to what Stephanie mentioned about the Manhattan Catholic School demonstration project. The city did take speed counts before and after. It's a school zone, so the speed limit is 20 miles an hour during school. Before the installation went in, it's a 36-foot wide street, and the average speed was 28 miles an hour. And during the installation, it dropped to 21. So it had a major impact on speeds. I'm going to talk more about the nuts and bolts of how we went about doing these, and we're going to focus on materials, permitting, and lessons learned. So again, our demonstration project materials were really simple. We're talking kids paint here, tempera paint. We would mix it with water or with cornstarch to thicken it. And then we would use, again, the flexible delineator posts and glass beads to do an attempt at retroreflectivity. And it was somewhat effective. Whereas when we step up to demonstration projects, the paint goes away and traffic tape comes in. We keep the delineators, and then we bump up the security for the pedestrians and cyclists with the rubber curbing, because in truth, paint isn't protection, and people will run over delineator, but they don't want to hurt their cars. So when the curbs are there, they don't. The beauty of butyl. So with our demonstration projects, we use butyl pads to quickly install the delineators. And we've learned a few things along the way. So each butyl pad is 8 inches wide, and it fits along the bottom of the base, which you can see, these are the bases here. You're supposed to use 1 butyl pad per base. That was quite expensive, and we realized that for 1 week, it was kind of overkill. So what we started doing was cutting them into 9 pieces. And so you can see the 2 vertical up at the top, the 2 vertical and 2 horizontal red lines. That's what we would do. So all of a sudden, instead of 1 butyl pad serving 1 delineator for $8, we were now serving 3 delineators for $8. And then we learned even more. So we would put them down, and you can see after the first use, there definitely was some grime and some dirt. We would, sweep or blow the road, but we never got all the dirt off. So some would accumulate. It wouldn't stick real well. So we started folding them. And in the summer, it actually is warm enough where if you fold that butyl over, you don't even have to put new butyl on there. You can smash it down and it'll stick just fine for another week. And finally, we were I don't want to say lazy, but it's not fun to remove the butyl from these. And so we started sticking a second layer of butyl on top of it. And that's about where you, as far as you can go. After that, you do need to start removing the butyl layers. But it's a great way to be, very efficient with your money and also quick with your time, and it works just fine. Striping. So striping versus paint here. We use tempera paint, as I mentioned, for striping. It takes a lot of time. It doesn't look real uniform. You can see on the right, those lines are not perfect. When you're driving, it doesn't look that bad, quite honestly, but in this static photo, it does. So, it's quite time consuming and it's less uniform, whereas the traffic tape on the left, is very easy to install. It looks great, but it costs a lot of money. In fact, we calculate it's about $1.65 a foot for traffic tape versus about 10 to 20 cents, depending on how much paint you put down. But anyway, we're talking a tenth of the cost for paint. The problem is it only lasts days for the paint versus up to years, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, for the tape. We use the same tempera paint for striping as well as the medians. And so the only difference is what we mix with it. And so when we're doing striping, we tend to take, or we don't tend, we take the tempera paint and we mix it with cornstarch to thicken it. And then we apply it with 4-inch rollers, and it's very flexible. You can even see on the left, we were able to paint over a joint that had this huge weed running through it, and it worked just fine. Whereas on the median in the middle, we mix the paint with water. It becomes almost like a watercolor wash, and it allows you to get a lot of coverage out of very little paint. And it looks really good, in person when you're out there. It's also really, really flexible to use. You can see all the different joints and cracks in the asphalt and concrete in that picture, and it does a really good job. And finally, I mentioned the glass beads before. So again, back to the left on the striping, we only use the glass beads on the striping, obviously. So it can be done with one person, but it's best to have two. One person paints, and then the person behind gives a heavy sprinkle of glass beads right on top of it. We found that taking an old starch container and filling it up with glass beads and poking holes with a screwdriver is the best way to do it. So these are all real practical, simple solutions, and they worked great. Getting, we all have these ideas, things we'd like to see, but actually getting the process going was a hard thing to do, and to figure out what we needed to do, who we needed to talk to get an okay in this town versus that town, and what it would take, the different hoops we'd have to jump through. And so what we ended up doing in Manhattan is, they have special event permits for things like parades and street fairs and whatnot. And so that process is what we ended up working with them to create. And it's been really effective. What it allows is that they have a formal process that they go through where code looks at it, public work looks at it, fire department looks at it. All these different people look at this application, and so we get a lot of eyes on it, and we're able to alleviate a lot of issues before they become so. And then also in Manhattan, we do use engineered stamped plans. City Public Works felt that was necessary. It alleviates some of the liability, and it makes it easy for us to install. So here's just a comparison of 2 pedestrian islands that we're going to do, or one we've done, one we're going to do, and kind of comparing them. So the demonstration projects, yes, we do need a permit to install it. We do not need one for the semi-permanent project, and that's because city crews are going to install it themselves. Both require approved stamped plans. The Public Works has to sign off on it. Final inspection, it's kind of iffy, but since the city crews on the semi-permanent will be installing, they will be doing the inspection, obviously. And then the demonstration projects, Stephanie and I do install. And it's very simple math. We're talking, simple radii here, measuring out. We have a string and chalk and measuring tape, and drawing it out takes 10 minutes. There's absolutely nothing to it. Pedestrian islands, we're going to talk about cost a little bit here. You can see the difference from a demonstration project to a semi-permanent. We mentioned both were very cheap, and they really are compared to permanent construction. The real difference in cost you'll see is the rubber curbing and the paint. Just the quality of paint or the striping or the tape that we're going through in the semi-permanent projects adds that extra $500. But the delineators are exactly the same. And the same thing for curb extensions. It's about double the cost again, and that really does come down to the rubber curbs and the striping. We're using that temporary tape. But again, you know, $3,000 for an intersection that'll last several years. That's it's a great value. So now I'm going to get into some lessons learned just real quickly. We have several materials available. We've thought about it. You know, we did these 1 year and then we waited a while and we forgot some things and we thought, oh, we should write those down. So we do have a technical guidance and lessons learned. It goes a lot more in detail about the things I've talked about here. I mean, we get into paint ratios to water ratios to cornstarch ratios. Really gives you a simple how-to follow along. Things such as storage, you know, all these things come in boxes. You use them once and then what do? You know, the boxes are torn, you can't reuse them. So we've gotten into those sorts of things as well. And then our demonstration for change is really kind of, like it says, it's a lookbook of our projects. It just highlights what we've done, different applications and where they've been. And then the how-to guide is something we will be working on. We've been working with KDHE and their CDRR grantees to work with really small communities. And what we're hoping to do is to make this so simple and available that communities of under 1,000 who don't have staff on their own can really do these things on their by themselves or with a little help from us or someone else. Just make it very, very simple, because if they don't have the staff to do it, they probably don't have the funding to do it themselves. But it's something that can be done near schools and really help implement changes across the state. Thank you.
Okay, so that was awesome. Thank you, Jared and Stephanie. So we do have some questions in the Q&A bar, and thank you for answering them. But again, we have some speakers on the call. So if you guys don't mind, could you please answer this question, orally? And our first question is, how much of a beating do these sticks take from vehicles?
I can answer that. One of the projects in Junction City was installed near a fire station. And lo and behold, it appears someone had a little fun a few times because there were large treads from a fire truck right over the top of it and they bounced back. These things are made to take a beating. They are flex posts. Even with the butyl, they stay down just fine. The one caveat being that using butyl, rain does affect them and the freezing cold does affect them. So when we've done early spring projects, we did one in City Park, Manhattan. We actually bolted them down using Tapcon screws. And again, you know, paint isn't protection. These delineators aren't really protection. People will run these over after a while. They realize they can do it. And that's why we're going back with the semi-permanent and doing these rubber curves, because people don't want to hurt their cars more than they don't want to run someone over, it appears. So they can take a beating. They're made for that, but we haven't, I don't think we've had any ruined, have we, Stephanie? The only thing that's ruined one would maybe be a snowplow.
Yeah, that one we ended up throwing away.
Cool. So the next question is, will these slides be shared with the participants? Yes, all the registrants and the attendees today will be sharing, you will be receiving these slides after this webinar. And next question is, have you tried parking bumpers in the semi-permanent installations yet?
That's what we're just about to do.
Cool. And then two more questions. Do you have before and after speed data in addition to community support?
I think I answered it partially with the school one. We did do before and after speed data. We have before with the stick projects, we will be doing that. We're actually teaming up with someone, a faculty member at Kansas State University. So we've gotten some counts and speed data for before. Once the stick projects go in Junction City, we will be getting speed data for during as well. So that is something we are working on.
And we also look at yield rates too. Mm-hmm. We try to kind of gauge that based on if having like that yield to pedestrian sign, if that helps, or if there's different things that we can maybe do to increase yield rates.
And is this easier to do as a small MPO rather than a large MPO?
So I typed an answer to that. Large MPOs, they get sub-allocation of STP funds and of TAP funds of transportation alternative. So potentially they have more resources available and staff to be able to do this. But I would say it's less about the MPO, it's more about the community that you're working with. So in our experience, and as Jared kind of went through, there are a lot more requirements when we work with Manhattan than with Junction City, or even we're getting ready to do these in a part of Pottawatomie County in a small town of St. George. I think it's really the community is what defines how easy it is and what either hoops you have to jump through or kind of the process that's set up in order to do this. Jared, do you have anything to add on that?
I would just add, that's the great, I would just add that just like this iterative design is scalable, so is the process you go through. It's as simple and fast as us drawing what some engineers call comics or cartoons that I make. You know, that's okay in some places. Other places, you know, in Manhattan, they have to be stamped design. So everything is scalable. So we're very flexible. Whatever they want, we accommodate.
Next, we have a question about the software. So what software do you use to show what you will do?
All right, no one laughed, but generally I make those using something called Inkscape. It is free software that is sort of a cross between InDesign and Photoshop. I don't know how to use those better programs, but again, this is free and it works fine.
I put the wrong thing in there. I thought you used Sketch.
That's okay. I replied to it too. So yeah.
Okay, I'll delete that. And then the interns and I, we know the Adobe suite, so we can use Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So I guess it works in both programs. It's just whatever you're most comfortable with.
Awesome. Next question was, can you provide a link to the resources you developed? So we will include this link in the email that we're going to send it to all the attendees. And the next question we have here, how does this work in small communities without technical staff?
So that's what we're working through right now with that State Transportation Innovation Council funding that we received. A lot of times, and Jared can kind of he can speak more to this. He's working with a lot of small communities in Kansas, but I think what we're trying to do is develop a resource. So if there's an advocacy group or if there's a city planner that wants to do this, they have the know-how of how to choose a location and what type of countermeasure to use. For us to just make sure that we're not liable in case something happens at one of those projects, we like to have an engineering firm kind of either stamp it or sign off on it. So if the community that you're working with has an on-call engineer, that would work. Or if there's someone at the city level, say maybe the city manager or the city commission, if they're able to sign off on it so that that advocacy group that's installing it, they don't have to hold liability insurance in order to move forward. But Jared, did you want to talk about your CDRR?
Sure. I think the other thing I'd add, yeah, working with the CDRR, it's come to attention that, you know, there's a lot of crosswalks that have already been gone through a study and they meet warrants. So they've already installed a crosswalk by a school or on a trail, but they're still not a great experience to walk across. I mean, quite honestly. And so a lot of them are mid-block. Those are really simple things, you know, to plan for. You don't have to worry about turn movement. So you don't have to worry about different radii and things of that nature. So creating these simple ped islands that just make the road narrower on a straight shot is such a simple thing to do that it just seems so simple. I don't know what to say. So working with communities and looking for opportunities that maybe they've identified locations or whatnot in their if they have an active transportation plan or in their Safe Routes to School plan, it may only be one project in one community, but it could be an important thing. So that's really what we're looking to do, is just have identified places where this can be done and then making it as easy as possible for people.
And we're also toying around with this idea of a template. That's kind of Jared's brainchild. And so it would be a printable template that you would be able to say, okay, this is how wide my street is. So this is how wide my pedestrian island needs to be. And you would tape it together by just printing it on your office printer and be able to lay that out and know exactly where a delineator needs to go, so that it kind of takes some of that math out of it if that's not your strong suit. We're going to probably have some of the communities that We're working with the smaller communities, test it out to see if it's something that's helpful or if it creates more confusion. So we really are trying to give tools for people that aren't as technical as what maybe the profession of planning or engineering is.
Awesome. The next question is, will you be doing a bike or ped count at the location where you had the demonstration projects?
Yes, so we take bike ped counts annually. For the projects that were mentioned in the semi-permanent, those are stick projects we will be doing, stick funded projects. We've taken pre-counts, or we will be taking pre-counts, and then there will also be counts taken during. So yes, we're hoping to see an increase. Most of them are near schools, so I don't necessarily think we'll see an increase in the numbers because people are already using them anyway. What we really want is to also do surveys to gauge the safety. How do they feel in the crossing? That's what really counts, is how are they feeling in the cross. That's what prevents so many people from walking is, you know, I live near a busy street. Doesn't bother me to cross it, but my 10-year-old daughter, my wife doesn't enjoy her crossing that, I can tell you that. So we're trying to, you know, make it feel better for pedestrians and make it feel, quite honestly, feel tighter for drivers to slow down. So that we'll be doing surveys and counts.
And I would say another metric we use, luckily we don't have a lot of crashes to be able to, we aren't going to do a before and after because a lot of the places that do have that higher crash instance, they're not projects that we're going to be doing these kind of countermeasures at. But I can tell you that a lot of what we hear, so that example at the Manhattan Catholic schools where we had the traffic cones and now we're going to have the semi-permanent, the principal there, the teachers there have told us of a lot of near misses, of people have had to jump back, you know, from the curb, or they've had to sprint across the street because someone almost got hit. And so some of that is just observational type of information. And it's great when we can get that speed data or we can get that yield rate, but sometimes we don't actually have that hard data to be able to point to. So if you have somebody that lives near one of these locations, if they can kind of be your eyes and your ears just on how it feels or what people are saying, that could also be really helpful.
I'll just add that we've been working a lot with different schools, and the principals are incredibly supportive of all of these projects. Never once have they said, we don't want to do that. They want more of it. They just don't know how to go about it. So it's been great.
I think, Jared, you did answer this one in the chat box, but what count technologies are you using?
Yeah, so for the vehicle counts and the vehicle speeds, we're using standard just tube counters, JMAR tube counters. For pedestrian and bikes, we're either having people count manually or we're also using some video counting, working on that one. But yeah, simple stuff. You know, it's an hour before school and an hour after school. We're not necessarily counting all day if it's not out of school.
The other thing I would add is Jared's very creative when it comes to when I say this is our budget, he finds a way to do something very innovative within that budget. And so a lot of times the video type of counters out there, they're really expensive. And so he kind of created this, it's a GoPro that's inside of a case that he made, that he put together some sort of metal post to hold it. So if anybody's interested on even little things like that we've been working on to try to save money, or just because we don't have that budget available to purchase that technology, I would say Jared's one of the most innovative people of figuring out how to do something on a dime.
It's not working perfectly, I have to be fair. So hold off on that.
Awesome.
We had the GoPro. We just bought an extended storage disk and an extended life battery, and then a polycarbonate clear case and some locks, and then quite honestly drew a thing out with, and then we had a welder make a bespoke connection to a telespar post, so it goes above a crossing sign at the intersection, and you can see 3 legs at the intersection. That's the idea. It's been overheating in the sun, so I'm gonna have to figure something out.
Okay, on that money note, so the next question is, in your experience, have demonstration projects helped in securing any grant funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best example I can give is that bicycle boulevard in Junction City. The entire boulevard was funded by KDOT, and they pointed to the demonstration project and said, because you guys have already done this, you have the community support, we know it's something that people want, they funded it. I think that there's going to be, as we get more of the semi-permanent projects out there, I think we'll even see more of those projects end up becoming permanent construction, either through Safe Routes to School. My hope is at least Safe Routes to School, transportation alternatives, or even the locals starting to find some of their funding sources to make it happen. Jared, did I miss any of the demo projects?
That's the big one.
Oh, Fremont.
Fremont, and then the MCS one is, we're getting it through STIC as well. So
yeah,
that's another test, I guess, but yeah.
The demonstration project that was at the park near the university and has the bus stop that's going to happen, that's permanent construction. That's going to happen next year. And it's actually a funding source with our transit agency. So there's a lot of opportunities to partner and have multiple agencies benefit from it.
I will also add, we did a demo project in the city park, which is a 1/4 mile by 1/4 mile. It's a small park and it's had a road through it for forever. And we tested the idea of closing that road to see how that went. And that idea has been adopted into a master plan. It's in discussion, but just even testing that, getting it into a master plan, I'd say is a big step.
Cool. And I think we have a final question, which is, how do you see this helping to implement bike or ped master plan or on safe routes to school plans?
Well, with funding being so limited, and I mean, the state folks can tell you when it comes to Safe Routes to School and transportation alternative grants, they're so competitive. And so if we are able to propose, we can do 5 projects for $10,000, you can't do that with permanent construction. And so I think that when you're truly looking to implement your Safe Routes to School or your active transportation plan to create safer crossings or safer opportunities, the semi-permanent projects they're hopefully just as effective. That's what we're going to kind of test next. But you can do a lot more than if you just went after one project at a time. And we have a lot of Safe Routes to School projects that are a need and not enough funding to actually implement them.
I'll add that at the Catholic school one, their PTO actually paid for the cones. So, it was a kind of a partnership. It wasn't a lot of money. I think it was $400. So they actually were able to pay for part of it themselves. And then that got buy-in for them, and that even pushed it further along. So
I don't see any more questions. So again, thank you, Jared and Stephanie, for this amazing presentation and the great projects that you guys have done. It's very interesting to know. And thank you all attendees for making some time and listening to our amazing speakers. And in future, if you have any amazing ideas, the webinars or the different projects that you would like to see, please feel free to email to Lisa. The email address is in the chat. And the next month on August 24th, we have the new and very great topic, traffic calming. So we'll see you next month then. Thank you so much.